Hello, and welcome to another edition of Office Chat, where we discuss current events that are taking place in and around the office. My guest today is Dr. C. Ellen Washington, who is a teaching fellow at the Oxford Roundtable. Welcome, Dr. Washington.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
So today's topic is diversity in the workforce. I'm sure, Dr. Washington, you have read or heard the recent comments that have surfaced from Charlie Scharf, Wells Fargo's CEO, whereby he was lamenting that he was unable to find qualified Blacks to fulfill different executive positions. Actually, to quote him exactly, he said that there was a very limited pool of Black talent to recruit from. Now, when I read this, I said, well, maybe he's speaking the truth. Maybe he's looking in the wrong pool for that talent that he would like to fill in Wells Fargo or at Wells Fargo. And then continue to looking. What do you say, Dr. Washington?
I say number one, I think the first thing is with recruitment, you have to be intentional in terms of where you're recruiting. I do not think that there is a limited pool of talent for many industries when you're looking for diversity, and in particular minorities. There are so many organizations that are tailored for minorities that you can start there, such as, National Society of Black Engineers. There's one for accountants. There's one for psychologists. And the list goes on and on. So I think the search method may not be the right one, but certainly I disagree with the lack of talent.
Right, because I think that when we look at it as a whole, there are many Blacks that are out there that are more than qualified. But going back to the statement that I made earlier, I think that the qualifications that many of these CEOs are looking for, I don't want to say that, well, I'll just say it. I think that they're looking for something that really doesn't exist, or if it does exist, they're putting on extra barriers to keep them from looking at the pool or the recruitment of individuals that would fill those positions.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the things that I can speak from personal experience with organizations that I'm affiliated with, such as the University of Arkansas Black Alumni Society, is that a lot of these associations have developed pipelines so that they can readily identify individuals who will fit roles which companies are looking to hire for. I think the ask has to be in the right place, and the intentionality has to truly be that for diversity.
Okay. I was looking at a study that was done by CNN in 2018 that said that 3% of all executives in the senior leadership position consist of Blacks, meaning that they are only 2 levels from reporting to the CEO. I find that oftentimes when executives are looking to fill those positions, the idea of the candidate that they want isn't always necessarily a Black person, because the person who is looking to recruit oftentimes happens to be white or Indian. And within their own circle or their pool, there aren't many people that they are associating with that have Black skin. And I think that in doing so, if you want to diversify, you definitely have to open up your pool of individuals that you are surrounding yourself around. I mean, this is 2020. We would think that at that level, the CEO level, and if you are particularly selling a product, that you would have more people in your circle than the people that look like you. And I think go ahead.
I agree. I was just listening to the news this morning, CBS Morning News, and they were interviewing a group of retired Black FBI agents. And they gave some statistics about the FBI in general. And the FBI, with its 13,000 or so agents, there's only about 3 or 4% that are Black. And those individuals who were Black that they interviewed that are retired, they talked about being passed over for opportunities because oftentimes those who are in those decision-making and leadership roles are white males, and they
Mhm.
tend to promote those that look like them.
Right.
So that challenge and that barrier is real. And this group has even formed a group known, I think they're called the Mirror Organization. And reportedly, the director is planning to have a sit down with them to try to address some of those inadequacies, and what I quite frankly think are just, injustices for qualified individuals not being given the opportunity.
Right. And then just speaking of investing in people, a lot of times, a lot of these companies aren't willing to necessarily invest in the talent pool that they have. They would
Mhm.
rather go out and, let's say, take someone from another company as opposed to saying, hey, we have talent here, let's develop that talent. Speaking from experience myself, when I, having been in corporate America and when I was recruiting, one of the things I always looked at is not necessarily the person's pedigree. Yes, that was important. But I also looked at if the person had the aptitude to do the job, to push the candidate forward. And I think in a lot of cases, when you have these executives that are white and they're looking in the talent pool, they don't see it, and they're not looking to try and develop that talent so that say, hey, this person could step in once I'm gone. They're more so comfortable with things that they're familiar with. John is next to me, so I'm going to promote John. And that's not to say that John has the skill set for that particular role, but they're more quick to look at John as opposed to, let's say, a Thomas who happens to be Black. And speaking with other associates of mine, colleagues, they've also, the way they view it is that, hey, why should I even look at those types of positions if I'm not going to get it? Why should I even get involved in the politics? And we have to be honest, there is a lot of politicking and politics that come into play. And we've heard this time and time again. If you're Black and you're applying for that position, you have to be twice as good as the other person. So entering the door, having that on you and knowing that, hey, not only are you twice as good, but you're probably exceedingly better than the candidates that you're going up against, but then comes into the political aspect of it. Do you necessarily want to play the politics? And are the politics being played fairly? Because if they're not, you're looking at, well, hey, I can do my own thing. I can open up my own company. Why should I want to work for a Fortune 500 company when there's so much politicking that's involved? And when I do get there, and should I get there, who are the people that are going to support me? Oftentimes we see that a lot of these individuals that do get to that sweet C, they have someone there who can groom them and they have the mentors. But when it comes to Black candidates, there's no one there and they're not giving the chance. It's almost as if though they're set up for failure. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Washington?
Yeah, some people describe it as being invisible. They're not even seen, even though they're physically there. They feel invisible.
Mhm.
I certainly think that when people are so disheartened and lament even going through the challenge of fighting through those barriers, it makes it hard. One of the things I do know that has been helpful in some cases is having that board of directors. And that board of directors has to be very intentional. And in many cases, that board of directors is not going to necessarily all be made up of people that look like someone as myself, as a Black woman, or someone
Mhm.
of my race. However, finding those people who are willing to speak for you when you're not in the room, who are
Right,
willing to champion you, who are willing to sponsor you, are the things that matter. Those are the things that move the dial.
right,
Many companies have pipeline systems in place and even succession plans. But when you look at who's in the pipeline and who's on the succession plan model, they're not people that look like you or myself.
right,
So we have to change not only that narrative, but that model has to change. And it's really a sad commentary when you have to, in some cases, mandate, I want a minority in this pool.
right.
Uh, you know, that to me is a sad commentary when you have to mandate that and you have to make that known. Uh, we know that the world is diverse. and knowing that a candidate pool should be diverse.
Right. Well, just going back to something that you said, I want to piggyback off of it to mandate that they fill that position with the minority. So now you're going in, tag that, hey, maybe I just didn't have the skill set and I got it because of my skin color. And I
Mhm.
happen to know for a fact that there are many Black people, people of color, that if placed, given the opportunity to, and an equal chance to apply for those positions, that they could knock it out of the water. But whenever you have to
Mhm.
tag something onto it, now they're going in, labeled, and then others will view them the same way. Well, they only got this position because of XYZ. That shouldn't be the case. Like you said, we are a diversified society, and we should be able to look and say, hey, this person has the skill set. I mean, I myself, oftentimes when I was hiring, I would say, I don't want to know the name. I just want to see the skill set. I would interview based upon that. Once I have it, bring the person in, and then I will talk with the person. Because a lot of times, even the names or the location where the resume is coming from, all these things come into play. And we can deny it and say, well, no, I don't think about that. But we're human, and we do, and we haven't got to that level. But being able to nurture that talent and saying, hey, bring this talent forward, and let's find this talent, let's cultivate it because this person has a skill set or has the aptitude and could fulfill this position if given the opportunity. Going back to the boards that you were saying, having someone within the board to be an advocate and to push it and say, hey, why don't we look outside of the pool that we're fishing in? Because again, as I said about Scharf, yeah, maybe he wasn't looking in the right pool. Maybe he should say, let me look at a different pool. Let me get outside of my comfort zone. And that comes into play also. If you're around the same people who are like you and act like you, when it's time to move outside of that, you're completely uncomfortable and you
Mhm.
don't know what to say. And then you start relying on he said, she said, and what you have heard, as opposed to getting to know the person, getting to know the skill set and the aptitude. Another thing that I want to touch on, diversity. You had mentioned diversity programs. A
Mhm.
lot of companies have diversity programs. So if that is the case, Dr. Washington, why aren't they able to select or to push up candidates from the diversity program? I was looking at Scharf. He's only been in that position for all of, I would say, 5 months. When he came in, I guess he looked, didn't see, or someone didn't show him, hey, maybe we should look here. So what about these diversity programs that aren't working? Because many Fortune 500 companies are always saying, we have diversity, we have our diversity program. What aren't they doing? Or are they just there to window dress?
Well, I'll give you a good example. For example, Microsoft is pushing diversity hires in recent months. And one of the things, I have a good friend that works for Microsoft that's actually on the D&I committee slash board. And I went out and looked at their application process and just did a dummy application. And nowhere on the application are they asking for any identifiers to be able to identify if the candidate is someone of a minority background.
Mhm.
So I think if you're wanting to hire minorities and you're even asking your employees to refer people, but you have no way of knowing that, how are you truly promoting diversity in your hiring practices? You
Mhm.
can simply ask a person to identify. Are you of this race? Are you of this ethnicity? They can either choose to identify or not. But
Mhm.
if you don't even give the option, you're limiting how you go about finding that diverse pool.
Right. And what do you say, or what would you say to Blacks who, when they do see that, to identify, your race and your background, a lot of them are, you know, don't want to necessarily identify out of fear that it might stop them.
Mhm. Well, I say right now, and I've certainly done it in the past, I think you identify, be
Hmm.
proud of who you are, be proud of your skill set.
Right.
And certainly I think in the current times, it would be more beneficial if these
Okay.
companies who are promoting diversity hiring practices are true to their word, it should offer as a helpful advantage in terms of certainly being given consideration.
Right.
No promises, but consideration and fair consideration.
Mhm. And then the companies who do advertise that they have these diversity programs, like Mr. Sharp, in all fairness, maybe he was completely unaware that they have it,
Mhm.
but they weren't doing what they claim to do. And again, being in corporate America, I have seen this on numerous occasions that it's broadcast and people are encouraged to go to these different meetings and to join different groups within the organization. But then it stops. And then people wonder, okay, what's happening here? We had the meeting, you talked about it, but nothing came to fruition. So that could be a case with him. I don't know. But I will say that a lot of companies claim to have diversity programs. But when it's actually time to see what has that program done, it hasn't done anything. What could companies do to ensure that the diversity programs that they have are actually working for not just the people, but working for the company? Because we are a diversified society. And if we're going to say something, then we should be able to look at it and measure it and say, this is what we've done. So for those companies who do have it, again, I ask, what are your suggestions? What could they do better with these
I think
programs?
one thing they can do better is doing better about checking the pulse, checking
Mhm.
the temperature. Uh, Everyone has programs, everyone has these affinity groups. Great, it shows some initiative. But if you're not checking in, checking the pulse to see what progress is being made, then are they truly working for you? The other thing is you have to allow those groups to have some voice, and not only just voice, but a little bit of some shared governance in terms of how those programs truly impact the mission and objective. If they're on paper, but they are not producing any action, then they're merely just words.
Okay.
And I don't think any company wants to have that as a part of their reputation. The other thing I think that they can do is there are some companies who are doing this well.
Okay.
And it does not hurt to take a look at what others are doing
Mhm.
and have a conversation and see if you can adopt some of their practices. Not everything is going to work for every organization, but if you're truly serious, you will start to identify where the things are not working and make adjustments.
Right.
That's the only way you truly get to the end goal, is to be intentional, to make changes where changes are needed, to have vocal input from those who are impacted, and to be honest when things are not working. Ask for help.
Right.
Seek out others who are doing it right and doing it well.
Right. Can you, off the top of your head, think of any company that you think is doing it right? They're getting it right.
Yeah, I wish I could say that. I do think one that I think is really working on this is Ben and Jerry's.
Okay.
I think Ben and Jerry's, in light of the recent events, they came out with probably one of the stronger statements of anti-racism, anti-injustice, and
Hmm.
they started immediately looking at their policies,
Right.
immediately adopting new things to ensure that their climate was promoting a safe space, was promoting diversity and inclusion. Because
Hmm.
I think so much is focused on diversity, but a diversity without inclusion
Hmm.
does not move things forward. See,
Mm.
it's not enough to just bring them in. When you
Okay.
bring in diverse people, those people need to have seats at the table.
Right.
They need to be a part of the conversations.
The decision-making
They need to be a
process.
part of the initiatives that are being implemented.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think Jerry's really has a good model, and I'm sure they're refining. But I think one of the things that I was impressed about was just their bold statement. And one of the things when you come out first or in the early parts of things and you make a bold stance and you show that you mean business, that speaks volumes.
Right.
That's the type of organization I want to be affiliated with.
And it's measurable. You can go back and you can measure it, and you can say, these are the things that we've done, and it's long term. I mean, I look at a lot of the companies who've been throwing money, at different, like I said, initiatives, diversity programs. And then when you look at it, you look at the board, you're like, okay, where's the diversity? Look at Amazon, a huge company. Look at Google. How many
Yeah.
people, Black, are there? And if you're going to say, hey, we support this, then how are you supporting it? Throwing money at a problem and not actually addressing the problem, I think, it is a problem for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. They've thrown money at it and nothing has happened. So what do you say to those companies who are throwing money, conglomerates, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all these tech companies? Remember at one point, they were creating these incubating cells for Blacks to come in and pitch their ideas. Because we have to admit, there isn't a lot of capital within the Black community so that they can get these projects that are started, but they have great ideas. Now I'm like, what happened? Where did Amazon and Google go with this? Did they steal the ideas and just take it on their own? I would like to think that's not the case. But what is your words of wisdom or advice to these companies that throw money at the problems and nothing, to make it seem as if though they're interested, but nothing else happens?
Well, I think to give money is one thing, but when you give money and you support the give, meaning you're actively involved in how the money is being used. If you have that type of money to spend, then certainly you have some ideas
Okay.
that you could share that may be of value. Because when you give money of those dollars to an organization who's not used to that type of money, they're going to have to go to the think tank to figure out, how do we make good use of this money? And if
Okay.
you've never done something of a project of that magnitude, why not have a Google or a Netflix to help be your mentor or your guide in how you think you may best utilize those funds?
Okay.
So I think they have to be willing to share to some degree. I'm not saying give your trade secrets away.
Right.
I understand those parameters and lines have to be drawn, but I think you have to be willing to do more than just give money.
Right. So if I'm understanding you correctly, not just give the money as an act to show that, hey, well, we did do this, we gave, and these have been like large amounts of money, 50
Absolutely.
million, 100 million, to these groups. And not only give it because, like you said, they don't know what to do with the money. They have an idea
Sure.
as to what they would like to happen. But if they don't have mentors or coaching or the infrastructure to carry it out, the money is there and then it's willy-nilly spent and then nothing gets done. And then we're back to the drawing board with, well, we gave you this and we did that. But like you said, if I'm understanding you correctly, not only in the giving, there has to be actionable items from the gifter to ensure that the money is being handled correctly.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying set so many parameters around how the
Right.
money, that the company or the individuals can make their own decisions. But I think anything that's new, any new charted territory, you need a guide. If I were
Right.
to go to a foreign country and I wanted to tour the land, I'm probably not just going to set out on my own. I'm going
Right.
to probably seek a tour guide that's seasoned, that's
Okay.
knowledgeable.
Okay.
So you have to be wise in how you're using resources that are being given generously. And certainly we appreciate those efforts, but just to give is not enough. And
Right.
we know that because we're still seeing little action, little
Mhm.
movement. And I can't speak for every company, but I can
Right.
speak for those that I read upon, for those that I have friends and family that work for them and what they're telling me. And I know, based on my own experience, that there still is a lot of work that needs to be done around diversity.
Right. Okay. And just so that our listeners will understand, just give us a little bit about your background because you're speaking from experience. And I know that you have traveled not only within the States, but abroad talking about corporations and institutions and whatnot. Could you just share with us a little bit of your background?
Sure. My background is primarily in higher education. I've taught for over 15 years. I've served as a department chair for over 8 years. I've spent roughly about 5 years in program development on leadership development. And in combination with those things, my research is focused on succession planning and leadership development, as well as diversity and mentoring. And I've been very fortunate to carry that message and research not only here across the US, but internationally. And in some of the places I've been able to go and share my research and experiences have been in the UK, in Europe. I've spent considerable amount of time at Oxford sharing my knowledge and my research findings
Mhm.
and sharing them with corporations. I've shared them with all women groups. I've shared them with all male groups. So I am trying to get the message out broadly. And when I say broadly, I mean from not only just domestic, but international, also across gender lines, because I think the more that people hear and see the evidence, the research,
Right.
and have an opportunity to discuss it, they can gain clarity and identify some reasonable action items that they can personally take to help be a part of the solution and not be a part of the problem.
Right. So in your research, you mentioned, you said mentoring the leadership and whatnot. Uh, what would your advice be to these companies at the head as to what they can do best on?
Mhm. I think one of the things that they can do best on is number one, being transparent
Hmm.
about what are the real issues that that company is facing. First, acknowledge. When I think people respect a leader who can acknowledge fault, acknowledge shortcomings. The second thing is when we talk about planning, if you want to plan in order to have things different, you need to identify people who look like the people you're looking for to help with
Okay.
that plan.
Hmm.
So those leaders need to be intentional about seeking out those people who are going to be a part of those planning actions. They need to be supportive of those things, and a part of the support is listening. So leaders we know are qualified in many respects because they have the role of leadership. But just because you're qualified to lead does not mean you're qualified to understand diversity. And
Right.
diversity is a growing concept, construct, topic, and there are professionals out here who do this day in and day out. So finding those professionals that will fit your mold, that can tailor your programs to your organizations, to your goals, will be essential. So setting aside not only time, but setting aside resources. And
Okay.
those resources will look like capital funding as well as human capital.
Hmm.
So when you're doing those things with intentionality and they're a part of your plan of action in terms of strategic planning, every leader wants to be able to say, I met my goals. And if you're putting that in your goals that go before your board of governors or board of directors, then you all will be able to speak positively about here are some changes that I helped to initiate along with these individuals, along with these resources. So you have to be honest, you have to be transparent, you have to listen, and you have to do careful planning
Okay.
in order for those things to really have impact.
Right. Okay. And what would your advice be to Blacks who are in a situation,
Mhm.
they want to go to the next level? Some of them don't want to have the stigma that, okay, I was filling a quota. I want to go in on my merit. I want
Mhm.
to go in by knowing that, hey, I got this job because I know that I can do it and not because of some quota. What is your words of wisdom to them? Because many, like I said, when we opened up, are probably sitting on the sidelines and saying, it's not even worth it. It's too political. What would you say to someone right now
Mhm.
who's listening to our conversation?
I think the first thing is that individual should really spend some time in doing some reflection and retrospection of what it is they want most for their career in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Identify a couple of goals. If that goal is to work for a company, if that goal is a certain position, if that goal is certain skill set, identify those. Make sure they're smart. But don't sit on the sidelines. Be actively engaged in your search, in meeting your goals. Seek out mentors who don't look like you.
Mm,
Seek out
okay.
coaching. Coaching is a wonderful thing that can really help individuals to consider things that they perhaps may not have considered concerning their career.
Okay.
And one thing I really do like about coaching is coaches will push you.
Hmm.
They're not going to allow you to make the excuses, to second guess yourself. They're going to push you and challenge you. And so if that's what you need, identify that, invest in that. A part of getting ahead is you have to take some responsibility for your own career development. And a part of that is investing in yourself.
Right.
When I say investing, I'm talking about investing time, resources that may be financial, but do not allow the narrative to be that of an imposter syndrome, or I don't want to know that I got in because of this. You know who you are, you know what your abilities and skills are. That's what matters. Don't
Okay.
allow the external noise to prevent you from going forward in your career.
Well, good stuff. Now, in addition to this, another topic that I know that we have chatted about offline that we definitely want to bring forward is hidden in all this is another element, women.
Mhm.
Women as a whole and Black women and their rise to the top and the difficulties that they experience, even more so now with COVID-19. Now, we can't talk about it now, but I definitely want to get your thoughts and your observations on that because there's a lot of studies that are out there that are saying that women who at one point they saw themselves moving up that ladder rather quickly, now with this entire pandemic, it has affected so many of them.
Mhm.
So I would definitely want to have you back to talk about that. Folks, you have been listening to Office Chat. I'm your host, Rob Harper, and joining me again is Dr. C. Ellen Washington. Please tune in again when we come back with a different topic. And if there's a topic that you would like for us to discuss, please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or Dr. Washington. Dr. Washington, where can they find you, please?
They can also find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place.
Great. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thanks.